What's up, notJust developers? Welcome back, and in this video we're gonna learn how to properly manage forms in React Native with React Form hook. We're gonna do this on top of our authentication videos that we did in the past, but this is a great opportunity for both people that are following the authentication flow videos and also for people that want to learn about React hook form, because I'm gonna provide all the code necessary for you to get started and follow this specific tutorial. So without further ado, let's jump into building it. The first step that you want to do is to make sure that you have a code and everyone is starting from the same page. You can access the source code of the application that we're gonna use for today's tutorial by finding it in the description down below or going to GitHub, my profile, Savin Vadim, and then authentication. Here you can clone this repository, and I provided a UI branch that is not gonna be modified in future. I'm not gonna push anything here. So after you clone this repository on your system, check out on the UI branch. And after that, we are all on the same page. You can install all the dependencies with npm install, and after that, run your application on the emulator, and you're all set. A very quick overview of the application that we are working with. Here is our login screen that has a username and password input. After that, you can press on the sign in. And today in this video, we need to provide some validations for these fields. And only if you provide them, you would be able to press on the sign in and to go to the next page. As well, another very interesting screen is going to be the creating an account screen. Here we have a little bit more fields that needs very specific validations. So here we're gonna play around with React hook form. So to get started, React hook form is a very popular library that helps you manage forms, and it was built specifically for React.js, but it also has support for React Native. The issue is that their documentation for React Native is not one of the best, and they only provide one example. For that reason, I decided that this needs a separate tutorial, because I think that other peoples might find it difficult to integrate React hook form in their applications. So let's start by installing our package with npm. So I'm gonna copy it from here, and let's paste it in our terminal in our application. Okay, so after finishing installing this library, we can open our source screens, and here we can find the sign-in screen, which is the code for this sign-in screen that we can see on the right. And what do we have here? If we scroll down a bit, we see that we have the logo image, and here are the two custom inputs for the username and the password, and after that a custom button for the sign-in. This is the things that we are going to focus on today. As we can see, at the moment, this form is a, I would say, do-it-yourself form and managed by us using state variables. We keep all the values of this form in a state variable, and then we also have like a function where we can potentially implement some very custom validations manually. For small application, this is good. However, for bigger application where you have a lot of forms, then this is going to be very repetitive process to implement this custom form management control, custom validations, every time you need to implement this logic in a new form. For that reason, React hook form comes in and helps us do very standard form management and validation. And with React hook form, we are not going to keep all the fields in a separate state variable, because they are going to be managed by the form itself. I deleted the two state variables. Another thing that I want to do is to comment out the custom inputs. I will simply start with two text input and also make sure to import the text input. And I want to do that in order not to confuse you with a custom input. I'll show you easier way, and after that I'm going to show you a better way and implement everything with a custom input. Now let's import some of the things from the React hook form. And I want to import two things. I want to import a hook called useForm and also a component controller that will help us render our inputs. Alright, so starting with a useForm, we are going to use this hook to get access to some of the variables to start managing our form. So use form. And what do we want to take from here? At this moment, we will need only two fields. The control function that will help us bind one input to a specific field, and also another function called handle submit. I'm gonna start with a handle submit because this one is quite easy. And what do we need to do with the handle submit function? In the custom button, we need to wrap our custom submit logic that will handle, I don't know, sending data to the server with the handle submit function. So we wrap it like this. And what this will help us do is, before calling our custom function that will send data to the server, for example, the handle submit will first validate the fields. It will first call all the validation, will make sure that all the fields are valid, and only after that it will get their own sign-in pressed. Now the next step is to somehow connect our text input with our use form here. How are we doing that? We first make use of a controller component in order to wrap our text input inside that controller. And here is the difference, because in React.js, this step is much easier because you do not need this controller and everything is kinda automatic because of the DOM possibilities to set a custom name and get the name, and I'm not gonna get into a lot of details there. But yeah, for React Native, it's a bit more verbose here with a controller, and you might think that it includes a lot of complexity, but after we understand how it works, we are going to take this controller, put it into a custom input, and then forget about this, and we're gonna get a very easy to use custom input component. So the controller has three important properties, one of which is the control function, and we took it from the use form. This is the first step that we connect our text input with our form. The next step is we need to specify a name. What is the name of a field that we are trying to manage here? And the name of this field is going to be username first. And the third important prop here is render method. And the render method is going to help us render the actual text input. So we will put our text input inside that render method like this. So if I do it like this, we still can edit it out. However, this is not done yet, because if I go in the on sign in pressed, let's go here, because of the handle submit function here, handle submit, the on sign in press will receive a property data here. So let's first of all do console log data and see if we receive anything. Spoiler alert, we're not gonna receive anything yet, but yeah, let's try to write something for the username, press sign in, and in the debugger we see username undefined. So the thing is that it knows that there is a field username, but the value of the field is undefined even though we wrote something there. Okay, so what we are missing here, we are missing the binding of value and the onChange text of a text input with the actual form. So how do we bind that? First of all, the render method will receive here some properties. One of that property is field, and field is an object that has other properties there as well, and it has a value on change and also on blur event. Now we can take this value and pass it to our text input. We will pass not to the on change but to the on change text on change, and the on blur to simply on blur. Okay, now if I try to write something and press sign in, come on, username, we already see the value there, which means that our form successfully attached and bind and is controlling this field and the value of this field. Okay, so that was the most important parts. We're gonna get to the validation a bit later, but now I want to show you how we can refactor some of this code in order to make it easier for us to use it. Because again, like, there are a lot of things to remember here, how to properly render a text input. So if previously we just had a text input, now we also need to remember about this controller. And now if I had to do it for the password, I'd probably have to just copy paste it here and replace my text input with the password, and to replace the name here, password, and so on. So as you can see, it's not the best way because it became a little bit harder for us developers to render simple inputs. What I want to do next to make it easier for us is to put this controller inside our custom input component. So let me first open it. And here our custom input at the moment has a simple view, a text input, and that's it. And it also has some styles for our containers and so on, because you can see here they look a little bit better than the default ones. So I want to move our controller from here to our custom input. So let's grab it and let's come here to the custom input. And I'm gonna paste the code here. So what will we need here? I'm comparing this text input and what values it has with this text input. So we have a value, but in this case the value is coming from the controller. So that means that we're not gonna need the value through props. The same thing with the onChange text. We're not gonna need the setter because it's coming from the controller. However, we will need the control property. We will need to receive the control from outside to be able to use it here. So control is coming from outside. The name of the field will also be a property of our custom input to be able to use this custom input for different field names. For example, username, password, emails, and so on. And now for the name here, I will send our name property like this. Let me comment this text input out. And what else do we have? We have onChange text, we have a placeholder, which here is username, but we want to take it from the property placeholder. We have style for our old text input, which we need to assign to our new control text input, and a field secure text entry in order to have a password protected. I'm gonna delete this one. Okay, so the things that we changed is we do not need the value and the set value here, but we need the control and the name of a field that we are trying to control here. Let's go back to our sign in. I'm gonna delete our simple text inputs and I'm gonna uncomment our custom inputs. And as I said, we do not need the value and the set value, but we need the control, which is our control, and we need a name. The name I'm actually gonna put it as the first one because it's quite important and it's gonna be easier for us to distinguish. So username. Same thing here, we don't need the value for the password and we do not need the set value. So we are gonna have name and the control here. In our custom input, let's make sure to import controller from React hook form. And now we are back to our initial design, but in this case, our form is controlled by React hook form. And if I press sign in right now, I should see the data in our log here. Here, username and password. We successfully managed to bind both our custom inputs for the username and the password to our form here. But at the same time, the way we are using our custom input is not very much different than we were using it before when we didn't use the React hook form. And that's because we have managed to put all the logic, all the low-level logic of the control and wrapping everything and sending all the data inside our custom input. And after that, when we need to use it, it's very simple to do it from a developer experience. The next step are validation rules. So the whole point of using this React hook form is to simplify our validation process. So how can we specify these validation rules? We can do that on the controller using a prop called rules. And these rules should be an object that contains different types of rules. For example, one of the rules that it accepts is required. If you set required to true, then React hook form will make sure that this text input is not null, and if it is, it will throw an error. Where can we receive the errors? One way to receive the errors is from the use form hook. Here, we can destructure the form state. This form state is an object that contains the errors. And if I simply console log errors, and then if I go in our debugger, if I press on the sign in here, I see the errors. Password, type required, message, there is no message, but yeah, we see the error is required for both password and username. However, if I input something for the username, we see that the error is only for the password. And if I do for the password, we see that the error object is empty, which means there are no errors at the moment. Instead of hard coding the errors inside the custom input, let's make them flexible and let's receive these rules in the properties. Rules like this, and let's assign a default value of an empty object in case we do not pass any rules here. So back in our sign-in screen, we can send to the custom input some rules. So let's do here rules, and what rules should the username have? First of all, required. I'm gonna go back to required true, save, and I'm gonna do the same for our password. Now if I press sign in, I still see the same errors, but the good thing is that these rules are flexible and they are passed through props to the custom input. Alright, so what we can do with these validation rules? One way would be to always check the validation rules and see if there are any errors, display them on top here. But the best option is not to display all the errors in the same place on the top or on the bottom, because this is very old school. A better way is to display the errors very close to the field that the error is referring to. For example, if you have an error to the password, you'd most probably want to render the borders with a red and display the error message underneath the input. So how we can do that? Well, that's also possible, and that's gonna be in the custom input here. The render function of our controller, besides the field, it will also give us the field state. The field state is an object that contains the error property. This error will be null if there is no error, or will contain the object with a status code and with a message for that specific error. So what we can do here, let me do it like this. So for the styles, I want to make the borders red if there is any errors. So we can see that our input, we do not have any styles for the input, we put all the styles to the container, but the container is outside our controller. So for that reason, most probably I'm gonna have to move the container inside our render function here, and after the input to close that view and to remove this view, save. So basically now our controller is the root, and inside it we have the container. I needed that because the styles of this container depend on the error, and we have access to the error here. So I wanted to add another style that will change the border color to something like red, like this. But it's gonna change it only if there is any error. So if error, display it with red, otherwise display it with this gray color. Save. Let's see. So initially there is nothing. If I press sign in here, both of them are displayed with a red border. And if I start typing, the red border disappears because validation is automatically applied. We see that there is a value. And if I delete everything, I am back to the red borders. But besides the red border, I also want to display the message of this error to give more context to the user. So after this view with the input below it, I want to render the text input. So the text of the error message, for example, I'm gonna start with a very simple error. And we see already that this is not possible because we are trying to render two childs. For that reason, I'm gonna wrap them with an empty fragment like this, so that we have only one child that contains the view and the text. For the text, I'm gonna do style color red and align self stretch in order to make sure that the text starts from the beginning. Basically, it takes the whole space there. So we are displaying the error here, and if I write something, the error should disappear. But it doesn't, because we did not implement the conditionally rendering this error only when we have an actual error. So if I do it conditionally like this, if error, display this error message, now the error message is going to disappear if there is no error. Perfect. But displaying just a simple error is not very user-friendly as well. So how can we display a more verbose error message? We can do that by rendering the error.message, but that at this moment is going to be null. So error.message, and I'm gonna do it like this. Render the error.message, or if this is an empty string, render a simple text, the default text here. So we're gonna see error only if this message is null. And in that case, now we see error. How we can provide the error message here? We're gonna go back to sign in screen, and where we provide the rule required, we can, instead of providing true here, we can simply send the error message that we want to show if the field was not provided. So required username is required. Save. Now, if I do not have the username, I see a proper error message saying username is required. And I can do the same for our password. and I already have password is required. Required is one of the validation rules that you can work with. If we go to the documentation, we can go here, the apply validation, and here we will see a list of valid validation rules that the library supports. For example, minimum length. So I can provide another validation rule for the password of min length of 3 characters. So the password should be minimum 3 characters. Now, if I write something here, I see this generic error message, and this error message is going to disappear if I have more characters than 3. In case you have a validation rule with a value and also you want to send a validation message that will replace this default error message, we can do that by providing an object. The object will contain, first of all, value, and the value is 3 because that's what we wanted to do, and the message can be password should be minimum 3 characters long. And now the validation message is password should be minimum 3 characters long. So this is how you can provide both the value and the error message if the validation rule fails. So play around with the other ones from here, for example, min-max. Pattern is an interesting one because with a pattern we can validate based on regex. So we finished everything with validation and managing the form in the sign-in page. However, if I will go to the create a new account here, I will see an error or this form is not going to work properly because it's using the old system of managing the input there with a custom input. So open up the sign up screen. And this is a great opportunity for you to test if you understood everything when it comes to React hook form. So get your hands dirty, try to implement the same things with a custom input, with the rules, with the validation rules for our sign up screen, and try to do it yourself. Give it a shot, spend at least an hour there, and if you don't manage, come back to the video and continue watching because I'm gonna show you real quick how we can apply everything that we have learned so far for the sign up page. So now pause the video and good luck. Okay, I hope you actually implemented everything and not just skipped and said, yeah, I'm gonna do it later. And yeah, let's see how to do it. So I'm gonna open the sign up screen and let's start by importing our use form hook from React hook form. Now, we are not gonna need all of these individual state variables because we are going to implement it with our form. So let's take, using the use form hook, let's grab the control and the handle submit here. I'm gonna start again with a handle submit because this is quite easy, and when we have a custom button, we simply wrap our own submit handler that will handle the sending the data to the server with a handle submit that will do the validation first. Then let's start to adjust our custom inputs with everything that we need. So we need first of all a name for all of them. The name here is username. Then we need the control. The control we're gonna send simply the control variable from there. And we will not need the value and the set value. So these are the minimum things that we will need. The validation we're gonna implement a bit later. So let's do for the email as well. Name, email, control, value and set value we remove. And let's do the same for the other things. Value and set value we remove, secure text entry we leave. So now if I navigate to the create an account, I do not see any errors and everything is back to normal. So if I will press simply register, I'll be redirected to another page. But that's because we have not implemented the validation rules yet. So we can send here to our username. As the last one, we can send rules. What should be the rules? So first of all is required, and the validation message there will be username is required. Also, I will say that the minimum length has a value of probably 3 and the message. And I will also the same way provide a maximum length, max length of 24. And if I try to press register, I see that the username is required. If I put something here, username should be at least 3 characters long. And if I do a lot of characters, I will see that the max length was triggered. So I hope that it's clear with the basic validation rules like required, min length, and so on. Let's see how we can validate the email using regular expression. So I'm grabbed a regular expression because nobody on earth remembers them and knows how to work with them. I just Google it. So email regex is equal to this one. And after that, using this email regex, we can provide some rules to our email here. So what are going to be the rules? The rule is called pattern. So pattern double dots email regex. So if I save this one, and if I start writing something in the email field and press register, I see the error message. However, if I do Vadim at notjustdev, everything is fine. So this way we can validate using email regex. As well, we can do the same thing as with other things. We can provide an object with the value, email regex, and a message that will say email is invalid. And now if I provide something and press register, I will see the custom validation message email is invalid. For the password field, the validations are pretty similar to the username, so I'm going to paste them here. The only thing is that I will say here password is required. The minimum length I will say 8, or depending on the validation that you want to provide for your password. So password should be at least 8 characters long, and I'm not gonna have the maximum length. Alright, so this is the validation for the password. The validation for the password repeat are a bit more interesting because here we have a custom validation method that we want to check if the password repeat is the same as the password field. How we can do that? So let's start by defining the rules here. So, one rule, if none of the available rules matches your requirements, there is a validate field where we can provide validation function. So here we will receive a value and we need to return true if a value is valid or false if a value is not valid. So you can simply do value is less than 5, which means that if a value is less than 5, or let's do value.length. If it's less than 5, it's going to be an error. I just want to show you how validate function works. So if I do register, and if I provide more than 5 values, this will return false and the validation will fail. Another thing is that instead of returning true or false, if we return a string, that string is going to be the validation error message. Say here, I can do it like this. If this is true, return true. Otherwise, return password do not match. And the error message should change here to password do not match. This operation of checking condition, returning true, or this one can also be written as this. So with a or operator, return true, or if this is false, return the validation message. Okay, so the thing is that we are not trying to validate it based on the length. We are trying to see if the value of our password repeat is the same as the value of a password. The value of a password repeat, we receive it as a property here, value. But how do we get the value of a password here to be able to check it? We can do this by destructuring the watch function from the use form, and using this function we can watch a field. And what does that mean is that we can get the value of a field in our code. So password is going to be equal watch, and we need to provide the name of a field that we are trying to watch. The name here is password. By doing this, our PWD will contain the value of our password, and now we can compare our value of the repeat password with the PWD, that is the value of our password. So let's save and check if it's working. So for the password, I'm gonna do something like 1, 2. And here, if I provide the wrong password, register, password do not match. However, if I remove the last 3 characters, it's already validated. If I add something, it's not. So that's how you do custom validation, and very specifically how you can see if a two passwords match and are the same. The last thing here that I want to show how to do is how you can provide the default values for these fields. If we pass to the use form an object here, we can specify the default values. And the default values, we can do it for the username. Make sure to provide the same key name as the name of a field. And here is default username. And now the username by default when you open the form will have this value default username. This is very helpful in forms where you edit data. For example, you are trying to edit your profile data. Then you want to initialize the form with the data that you already have and let the people be able to update it instead of writing it from scratch. So yeah, this is the default values. And we do not need it here. I just wanted to show that that's also possible. In the next part, I'm going to implement the React hook form in the other forms that we have in our application. And I'm not going to bore you with everything. I will just include a speed run for this. And if you need to follow along, you can decrease the speed of the video in the corner of the settings there, put it at 0.25 and enjoy watching if you need to make sure that you're doing the same changes. That was it for today, guys. We have implemented React hook form and we implemented all the validation for our forms. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you had some troubles, check out the source code in the description below. And also make sure to subscribe to the channel because in the next weeks we are going to continue this tutorial and we are going to implement this authentication flow with AWS Amplify. So we are implementing the backend of it. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss the future videos, and let me know down below in the comments what other tutorials you're interested in. But meanwhile, check out this video and this video. They're both very valuable tutorials where you can learn a lot of React Native.